Welcome back to Quick Bits. Are the Menendez brothers getting released from prison like Jeffery Williams, who was just released due to an unexpected twist in the YSL prosecution down in Georgia? There are some interesting Diddy updates, including the fact that the grand jury is still convening. So are there more indictments coming for Diddy? It looks like there might be. And the Sarah Boone trial came back with a verdict in just about an hour and a half. So we're going to have to talk about that. And a California case that many of you were interested in resolves in a settlement. So let's get into the quick bits that are getting longer as the weeks go on. I'm legal analyst Emily D. Baker. This is the Quick Bits, where I break down just the main points of the pop culture and entertainment cases I'm currently covering on YouTube and the Emily Show podcast. Let's get into it. First, over on the live stream channel, I had been covering the Sarah Boone trial out of Florida. The court days were wildly long because the judge would be like, hey, can we just go like an extra hour and a half, 2 hours? And the jury would be like, cool. And then everybody would do it. So very long court days, but 6 days of trial, about an hour and a half of deliberation. And the jury came back and convicted Sarah Boone of second-degree murder for zipping her boyfriend, George Torres, into a suitcase and leaving him there, despite him telling her that he could not breathe and saying that he needed to be let out. The jury ended up coming back fairly late on Friday, October 25th. What's interesting is the judge had gotten allowance to let them deliberate until like 11 p.m., which was wild, but they came back around 8:30 p.m. with that verdict. And that case will be back in court on December 2nd for sentencing. So if you want to join me, don't forget to download the Law Nerd app so that you never miss a moment, whether it's in live court or here in the Quick Bits. First, talking about the Menendez brothers, there has been a lot in the media and numerous press conferences about whether or not the Menendez brothers will be resentenced. This is still a decision up for the court. On October 30th, prosecutors asked the court to consider resentencing both Menendez brothers, who were convicted back in 1996, the brutal murder of their parents. In a press conference by the Los Angeles County District Attorney, and we've seen press conferences from the Menendez brothers' attorneys and family members, we have heard how strongly those in the Menendez brothers family and the family of the victims feel that they should be resentenced. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the district attorney would ask the court to remove the special circumstances in this case. The special circumstances in this case made the Menendez brothers ineligible for parole, meaning they were serving life without the possibility of parole. If they are resentenced without the special circumstances, then they would be resentenced to 50 years to life, meaning they would be eligible for parole at some point. But because these crimes were committed when they were 18 and 19 years old, they would fall under the youthful offenders law currently in place in California, meaning they could be immediately eligible for parole if resentenced. The Menendez brothers also had a habeas petition pending. This is strictly focusing on the district attorney's request of the court to resentence. That habeas petition is still going forward for now. But what does this look like when the case is back in court on December 11th? Well, the judge is going to have to decide whether or not to allow the resentence. The judge does not have to remove the special circumstances. A jury found those special circumstances, and they were sentenced pursuant to those special circumstances. However, the Menendez brothers also asked California Governor Newsom for clemency. So even if the court decides not to resentence, then it's possible that the governor might grant clemency in this case. Finally, if the court grants the resentencing on December 11th and does resentence the Menendez brothers, making them eligible for parole, that still has to go to the parole board. So it will not be an immediate process where the case will come before court in December and then they will walk out of prison. This is going to be a longer period than that because it needs to go through the parole board and then the governor will have the opportunity to review it. So we will see what happens when they are back in court on December 11th on the resentencing and what arguments come before the court then. And while that is pending, the habeas petition also has a hearing on November 25th asking for a new trial for newly discovered evidence. And we will see how that moves forward. So there are two things pending in this case, plus a bid for clemency. But unlike Jeffery Williams in the YSL case down in Georgia, when this case goes to court December 11th, they won't be walking out of custody. But Jeffery Williams just did. I have been covering updates in the YSL case that has been pending since early 2023 for the arrests that happened in 2022 on a wide-ranging and convoluted racketeering prosecution in Georgia. You've probably heard about this case. I have some summary coverage of it and some of the wildness that has happened. This case is now on its second judge. It is going into almost a year since opening statements, but it took them over 11 months to pick a jury. So this case has been in trial longer than I think I've ever seen anything go to trial. And it has had its fair share of interruptions. I don't know how a jury is keeping this case straight. And I said early on with everything that was going on that this case seemed ripe for a mistrial with how much mess has happened. And funny enough, the court was considering a mistrial based on something a witness had said on the stand, but that mistrial would just start the whole process over again. So what we've seen since then, running up to Halloween, is numerous defendants taking plea deals, including Jeffery Williams, who you might know as Young Thug. What I will be breaking down more on the podcast this week is how all of this went down leading up to the plea deals. But in a quick bit summary, Jeffery Williams was able to plea not to a deal from the prosecutors because negotiations broke down. And if you've seen any of the interactions between Young Thug's attorney and the prosecutors in this case, that probably doesn't surprise you literally at all. But they were negotiating a plea deal wherein the prosecution was asking for probation. And then when plea negotiations broke down, the prosecutors came into court and asked the judge for 45 years. For 45 years. They went from probation to 45 years. But we will talk about that more on Wednesday. The court was disinclined to acquiesce to that request after Jeffery Williams pled open to the court, which means without knowing what the judge was going to sentence him to, without a deal from the prosecution, chose to plea to the things he was charged with to the court. The court did allow him to plea no contest to one of the charges, which is somewhat unique with an open plea, but he did plead guilty to multiple drug charges, multiple gun charges, and a gang charge, and then was allowed to plea no contest to the RICO charge. And I wonder, and we will explore together whether that indicates how the judge feels about this case. At the end of the day, the court ended up sentencing him to 40 years, but serving 5 in custody. And then the judge commuted that 5 years to time served. He has been in custody since May of 2022. Then 15 years on probation, which is a wild amount of time on probation, including a large part of that supervised and then some unsupervised, plus 20 years backloaded, which is what they call it in Georgia, but you might be familiar with that being referred to as a suspended sentence. But whether you call it backloaded or suspended, there is a 20-year sentence out there that he will be sentenced to if he violates probation in that 15-year period. If he does not violate probation, then that 20 years will be commuted to time served, which means it will go away if probation is successfully completed. We're going to talk about some of the onerous terms of this probation. But on Thursday, Halloween, Jeffery Williams was released from custody. So what does his lawyer think of that plea deal? We're going to talk about that on Wednesday, but he's not thrilled. However, this is the client's decision because the client is ultimately the one sitting in custody, and people will plea for those massive probations to get out of custody. We will talk about the other defendants, how this case moves forward, and what's going to happen if there ends up being an eventual mistrial anyway on Wednesday. And in Diddy Updates, you might see the headlines about a variety of things going on in the civil lawsuits. And that's because of the civil lawsuits that I have broken down, there are numerous judges now assigned to the different civil lawsuits. They are not all being handled by one judge. One of the judges in those Buzbee civil lawsuits, all the different civil lawsuits filed under John and Jane Doe aliases, One of the judges ruled that the victim cannot move forward as a Jane Doe and must either file the lawsuit under their own name or the lawsuit will be dismissed. Now, this is something that Sean Combs is asking for in the criminal case. There are motions that we will be going over regarding whether or not the federal government has to give a bill of particulars, has to disclose who the victims are, who everyone is, and more. But we will get there on Wednesday. For these purposes, we are talking about the civil cases and what the judges are doing there. So one judge has ordered that the plaintiff in that case either choose to identify themselves or dismiss the lawsuit. In a number of the other lawsuits, the plaintiffs have filed motions asking the court to allow the case to proceed anonymously. And the courts have routinely said, yes, but once the defendants are all in the case, you're going to need to bring this motion again and allow the defendants to object to the cases, the civil cases, proceeding under John and Jane Doe plaintiff names. So we will see if these cases will proceed under John and Jane Doe's, if they will not, and how that might impact or not any of the criminal proceedings. What's wild to me in the criminal proceedings is that CNN is reporting as of October 31st that the grand jury is still ongoing in the Sean Combs case. How they know this? It seems that a lawyer for one of the witnesses called to the grand jury disclosed it to the media, which, seeing that there is a pending gag order in the criminal case, is kind of wild. So this is coming from CNN. Their headline is Grand Jury in Sean Diddy Combs Case, Hearing from Witness Who Claims He Has Footage of Combs Potentially Victimizing Celebrities. And it goes on to say a federal grand jury has been regularly convening in the continuing criminal investigation into music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, 3 sources told CNN. So, will there be more indictments? Well, it seems that there is an ongoing grand jury continuing this criminal investigation. And I would say with that, it is likely that there will be either a superseding indictment or additional separate indictments. It says that jurors on Thursday, which was Halloween, were expected to hear from a witness who claims he is in possession of videos that allegedly contain footage of celebrities potentially being victimized by Combs. Attorney Ariel Mitchell told CNN that one of her clients was summoned to testify in front of the grand jury Thursday. This client has not filed any suits against Combs and is not claiming to be a victim of Combs's misconduct, according to Mitchell. Sorry, I misread that. It says alleged misconduct, according to Mitchell. He is a witness, she says, with information and evidence about accusations of sexual abuse and other misconduct by Combs, some of which allegedly involve celebrities. And of course, when CNN contacted the U.S. attorneys and Combs' attorneys, they declined to comment because Combs' attorneys are asking for a gag order. So, ongoing grand jury. I think we will probably see more indictments here. I'm wondering if this is why we're starting to see Diddy's attorneys fighting so hard in court over a bill of particulars and trying to figure out where they stand now and possibly where the feds are going. Only time will tell on this one, but I think we will be seeing more from this grand jury that, shockingly, we know is still convening. And if you missed the Halloween live stream this year, we had a rousing food court episode and talked about matters of internet interest. What was that? Well, Prime Hydration, which you might know because it is backed by online personalities Logan Paul and KSI, is being sued by Messi, the soccer player, whose drink Moss Plus by Messi is alleging that Prime Hydration had threatened to sue them. So they went to court first and are asking for a declaratory judgment that their sports drink does not infringe on the trademark or trade dress of Prime. We will see if that sorts itself out, but we learned quite a lot about that lawsuit and others in that episode of Food Court. And if you haven't checked it out, it'll be linked below. And during Food Court, I also made the announcement that right now we have an incredible buy one, get one on the beloved custom Law Nerd tumblers. If you want to check that out, we have some huge changes coming to the Law Nerd shop. So if you have any favorite designs, please make sure that you go and get those before we change over the Law Nerd shop in November to an entirely new look and feel. So our legacy designs are going to be going away, and we have an entirely new Law Nerd shop for you at the end of November. And in other internet news, a lawyer who you are probably familiar with if you follow my content has a lot to say about MrBeast. There has been a lot going on in the world of MrBeast, and I've covered briefly the lawsuit going on with relation to the Amazon series Beast Games. We have not talked a lot about the other allegations that have gone on around the internet, but those allegations of misconduct in the workplace prompted MrBeast and his company to hire outside investigators to come in and do a thorough investigation of the workplace, which attorney Alex Spiro, whose name you may recognize because he was that New York City attorney that was representing Alec Baldwin in the New Mexico criminal trial, he and the law firm where he works, Quinn Manuel, have done the 3-month investigation into allegations made online of workplace impropriety at MrBeast's company. They indicated in their findings on Friday, November 1st, shortly before I recorded this, that between 5 to 10 employees had been fired as a result of this investigation. And MrBeast posted a letter detailing the findings of this investigation on X. It's a 2-page letter. I'm sure there were many other conversations that went on about this, but that letter seemed to be written without a ton of attorney-client information so that it could be distributed publicly, and was. He said briefly that the Beast company, quote, has grown exceedingly quickly from a YouTube startup comprised of a group of talented young individuals into a much larger entity, and that it's not uncommon that policies and practices essential in a mature company would lag behind commercial success. So at the end of the day, the finding from Spiro, hired to undertake this investigation, stated that, quote, it is clear the company is committed to remedying historical issues and creating a mature culture where problematic behaviors are not tolerated as it enters this new phase. The company has already implemented or is in the process of implementing changes to ensure a safe and professional corporate culture today and moving forward. These include sending a clear message regarding tone at the top, hiring a new chief executive officer, chief people officer, and general counsel, and soon to be hired chief financial officer. So it sounds like a new CEO was already hired. I don't know what position they are titling chief people officer, but I hope it's HR, general counsel, and they are hiring in a CFO. This is a massive company, so the fact that some of these things weren't in place actually surprises me a bit. They said they are implementing mandatory corporate training for all employees, developing new policies codified in an employee handbook, which makes me worry that there was never an employee handbook, establishing an anonymous reporting mechanism and hotline for employees, and swiftly terminating individuals who have violated company policy regardless of their position or level within the company, identifying additional employees for targeted training and executive coaching to address professionalism and compliance with company policy. So that is what Alex Spiro and the team investigating into the company determined was the path forward for MrBeast's company. If anything, I don't know if the results of the investigation are going to change much in the online sphere for the conversation surrounding MrBeast, his friend group, and his companies. But maybe it will serve as a reminder to creators that as creators start to grow, oftentimes they want to create content. They are not always thinking about also creating a company. And there are a lot of push pulls in there. And asking someone for help structuring that early on is going to be essential. And far too few creators do that. CEG, the David Dobrik, Jeff Wittek lawsuit, which we will be checking back in on next week. And finally, a high-profile California case that you may or may not have been following, but for those of you that have, the lawsuit saga of Cedar the Goat has come to an end. You may have heard of this case, which stems from a 2022 junior livestock show through 4-H at the Shasta District Fair. The 9-year-old who showed her goat Cedar and her parents say that she did not agree to auction off the goat after the livestock show. So when an individual purchased the goat, they sought to enforce that purchase through having the goat seized by law enforcement. And law enforcement did, in fact, track down and seize the goat for slaughter to go to the person who purchased the goat after the fair. The family had told the fair that they didn't want to auction the goat, had told the fair that they would take care of any damages the fair might suffer because of it, and did not want the fair to take the goat. They left the fair with the goat and took the goat out of the county, which did not dissuade the sheriffs from driving from Shasta more than 500 miles to Sonoma to seize the goat pursuant to a warrant. However, the warrant was not for the location where they seized the goat from. And this, of course, led to a civil lawsuit over the improper seizing of the goat. So on Friday, November 1st, news came out that this settlement had been reached to the tune of over $300,000. And this is a settlement with the Shasta County Sheriff's Office and a lieutenant and 2 detectives who took part in seizing the goat. Yes, more than 3 law enforcement officers went multiple counties and 500 miles to track down a goat that was supposedly purchased for somewhere under $1,000. Other defendants in the lawsuit are still ongoing, and that includes fair employees, the 4-H volunteer who was involved in all of this, and that is still ongoing. But at the end of the day, I don't know how much further this case can go, because when they go to trial, a distraught now 11-year-old is going to explain that they took their goat to the fair to be part of the show and did not agree that the fair could auction off or sell the goat. And I imagine a jury is going to look at the now 11-year-old and be like, why is everyone getting so extra about tracking down this goat multiple counties over for the purchaser? So I think we will probably see the rest of this settle now that the county has settled, but who knows? But I went and looked into what was going on with Cedar the Goat, who I had talked about ages ago. I don't even remember when we talked about this because I got so many questions about how does somebody illegally seize a goat. So we talked about this on a live stream segment probably a year and a half or 2 years ago when this happened. But I thought of it because I saw the news that a Instagram famous squirrel named Peanut was seized by the state of New York. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Thank you to our sponsor, Lume Deodorant. Did you know that Lume Deodorant works not just on your pits and your parts, but really everything from the collarbone down? Yes, including your feet. And since it's getting into that boot weather, you might actually want to try it. I'm not joking. Lume Whole Body Deodorant is like no other. It was created by an OBGYN who discovered that BO isn't just an underarm thing, it's like an everywhere thing. So she developed a pH-optimized deodorant that's clinically proven to block odor everywhere. And no matter where you use it, Lume is proven to keep working for up to 72 hours. So if you are ready to try Lume for yourself, we have an offer for you. The Lume Starter Pack is perfect for new customers because you can try a variety of different products, including things like the mini body wash, which I take to travel, and the deodorant wipes, which get packed into my kid's bag for band. But it also comes with a solid stick deodorant and a tube deodorant. Plus, there's free shipping, and who doesn't love that? And remember, new customers get 15% off when you use our exclusive code. Plus, if you combine that with the already discounted starter pack, it equals over 40% off the starter pack. So use code EDBQB, like the Quick Bits, to get 15% off your first purchase at lumedeodorant.com. That's code EDBQB at LumeDeodorant.com. And don't forget to let them know that the Quick Bits sent you. Let's get back to it. So some of you might follow Peanut the Squirrel on Instagram and have seen the news by now that Peanut the Squirrel was seized by New York State authorities. I think the situation is going to be different than Cedar the Goat because that involved private entities and trying to enforce a sale that may or may not have happened because that is very much in controversy. This story is involving the government agency, the Department of Environmental Conservation, and the department seizing the Squirrel, and the family also had a raccoon living in the home, which I was not aware of. So the raid on Peanut's person's home, Mark, happened on October 30th. Mark had posted to his social medias and Peanut's social media that the DEC came to the house and raided the house without a search warrant and took Peanut and Fred from the house. A spokesperson for the DEC released a statement saying that the agency started the investigation after receiving, quote, multiple reports from the public about the potentially unsafe housing of wildlife that could carry rabies and the illegal keeping of wildlife as pets. There was not time for them to get Peanut and Fred the raccoon out of DEC custody before both animals were euthanized. And as you would expect, Mark posted his frustration on social media to the internet saying, well, internet, you won. You took one of the most amazing animals away from me because of your selfishness. It's just kind of wild that I don't know if there's going to be much of a remedy here vis-a-vis looking at Cedar's case and bringing a civil action. But you never know if you will see this end up in civil litigation. Interestingly enough, the Associated Press noted at the end of their article that Mark Longo is not the first animal owner to protest the confiscation of a pet by New York authorities. A man near Buffalo, New York, is actually suing the DEC to get back his 750-pound alligator that was seized in March. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on this, and we will see how it moves forward. Unfortunately, because the animals have been euthanized, no matter what happens legally, it doesn't really bring anything back or undo what was done. Those are today's quick bits. I will definitely be keeping an eye on what's going on with any potential lawsuits due to the DEC's action with Peanut the Squirrel. And I will be keeping an eye, of course, on all of the other stories we were covering and breaking down everything that went on in YSL and the Diddy cases more thoroughly on Wednesday. Thank you for joining me for the quick bits that are getting longer as the weeks go on. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next one. For deep dives into the stories that I covered here, you can find them on my YouTube channel at The Emily D. Baker and The Emily Show podcast. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday. The podcast goes live on Wednesdays. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything I'm doing, receive the fastest notifications out there, and get more Law Nerd community, join me at lawnerdapp.com, our free app for iOS and Android.